Call the meeting to order. Begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Otter, could I have a call on the roll, please?
Mr. Thacker.
Present.
Ms. Weger.
Here.
Ms. Dees.
Here.
Mr. Norris.
Here.
Ms. Wilson. Mr. Thompson. Mr. Loudermilk.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Otter. It should be noted that Councilman Thompson was unable to attend tonight due to a work obligation that he could not get away from. So with that, I would move on to public comments. Ask that comments be limited to items on the agenda. With the only exception, I would ask to start, we would have a representative from Boy Scout Troop 434. Please address his group to the audience.
My name is Don Lark. I'm here tonight to represent Boy Scout Troop 434 out of the Cretenstein Post. We've got a few boys working on rank advancements. The badge they're working on tonight is citizenship of the community. One of the requirements for that badge is to attend a public meeting of sorts. So that's what we're here for tonight. So tonight we've got Max Chase, which is our patrol leader, Cole, and Pacey. Okay? You guys want to stand up? As you can tell, they're super excited. They wanted to stay home and watch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
But we're like, no, we're coming. So, but that's what we're here for.
Great. Yes.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Awesome. It's well worth it and well satisfied.
Thank you. We will continue with public comment. If there's anyone else who'd like to speak, now is the time to do that. Please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. It does not appear there's anyone else who'd like to speak at this time. Communication from elected officials, other officials, or agencies of the county. Does anyone like to speak at this time? It appears there is not. First reading by summary reference of proposed ordinances and resolutions. ROC 2022-29, additional appropriation 2022-22, public defender, legal services. It's like a request for $20,000 for legal services. We have ROC 2022-31, additional appropriation 2022-23, Vigo County Health Department. It looks like a request regarding repairs, maintenance. We have next ROC 2022-32, Courts, Resolution 2022-10, council support to expand courts. Next, we have ROC 2022-33, reduction of appropriation ordinance 2022-01, supplemental juvenile probation and reduction of appropriation ordinance 2022-02, drug court budget reduction. ROC 2022-34, additional appropriation 2022-24, commissioners ARP funds. ROC 2022-35, resolution modifying local income tax rates, annual allocation to township fire safety agencies. ROC 2022-36, council, additional appropriations for gasoline. ROC 2022-37, council, review of estimated property tax limits and circuit breakers for 2023.
And lastly, we have ROC 2022-28, Resolution 2022-11, terminating real property tax abatement, Midwest Investments LLC, and Resolution 2022-12, terminating personal property tax abatement, D&D Automation, Inc. With that, we'll move on to reports from committees. There are none. We now have resolutions and ordinances other than appropriations. First up, we have before us ROC 2022-28, resolutions 2022-11 and 2022-12, terminating real property and personal property tax abatement hearing for Midwest Investments LLC and D&D Automation, Inc. I believe they have counsel present to speak on their behalf.
Jeff Lind, Lind Law Firm. I apologize for being without jacket and tie. I found out about this afternoon.
We'll give you a pass, Jeff.
Pardon me?
We'll give you a pass.
Thank you. Well, I guess the point would be I can look better than this. I do apologize on behalf of my client, joint ownership. One entity owns real estate, the other owns the operating company. And in the submission of their compliance with statement of benefits on both tax abatements, while they did exceed the amount of capital improvements and personal property purchased, it is true that they have not yet hired the 3 employees that they fully expected to hire. I noted upon review this afternoon that they had 10, they have retained 10 employees. Their CPA identified that they retained 11. Now, how you can have 10 and retain 11 is beyond me. They've added an employee, and after the construction and purchase of the personal property, they hired 2 employees and have lost one of them to a competitor, a larger industry, and are currently trying to fill that position. That position is a seasoned machinist. The 3rd employee is tied up with a change in the requirements for certification to qualify to serve the Department of Defense. They have the lab built for quality control, which will be needed for the work they do for the Department of Defense. But subsequent to the application, the Department of Defense, out of concern for cybersecurity, changed the rules on qualifying. So they really had to start that process from the beginning. The lab is sitting there waiting for that quality control employee, but they hope to have that certification by the end of the year. All the facilities are in place for the employees. The current employee they'd love to fill right now. The other one they won't be able to fill until they get the certification, but the spot in which he or she will work was part of the money they spent, and they promised you they'd spend for the tax abatement. I do have Dave Decker here if you have any questions or are tired to listen to the lawyer, but I would ask you to recognize that these are circumstances out of the control of the applicant. Now, on the quality control individual, it's simply because of the change in circumstances on trying to get certified. On the hired and lost and still seeking a qualified machinist or seasoned machinist, as many in industry have discovered, it's a challenging environment to find employees. And then they face the added burden of trying to compete with Toyota down in Evansville and GE here. But they have assured me, and I assure you, that they're trying to fill that position. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Any questions from council? Councilman Wager?
On my mic. I know you like it off, but I'm gonna turn it on. I have been down to their facility. It's remarkable, and what these fellows have built from the ground up is just extraordinary. When they get it all fired up and rolling, it's gonna really produce some income into this county, taxes and so forth. I appreciate the circumstances that are so difficult. I know Senator Ford went down there to see the facility as well, and he understands that Defense Department business. I mean, it is high security to get those clearances, and so I can understand their difficulties. I certainly recommend that we retain this tax abatement and support them in any way we can.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Mr. Decker? Yes.
My mic is on, but I can't shut it off. So.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I do appreciate you coming in here. That's how I understand the process works whenever paying somebody's not even.
And I will say, more than a year ago, Dave had gotten a letter to me telling him how important the follow-up was. This is, he and his brother, it's their first round of having gotten a tax abatement. And he professed to me, he now knows just how serious it is to not only comply, but answer any questions regarding potential noncompliance.
And I think it's fair to say we're here today because we felt as a council last time we had spoke about this that there was some issues with noncompliance. I think what our duty here today is to see if we as a council still believe that they are in noncompliance, and if we feel that they are in noncompliance, is it circumstances that are out of their control that are making them being noncompliant with the parameters of the abatement that was given to them. So I'm not sure there's anything we can act on today necessarily, but I think Mr. Lynn has very clearly articulated why the issues are present, and he has provided us with additional information that we didn't have at the last meeting when we discussed this. So I feel comfortable with what has been presented tonight, and it appears that the council does as well, and then we can act accordingly next week. If there's nothing further, I think we...
Excuse me, Dave, when will you be back? And I will be gone on a mountainside next week.
I don't believe that there's any reason for either of you to be here next week. I think, Mr. Lynn, you've handled this to our satisfaction, and we can act next week in your absence.
I agree with that as well. And I think Karen's got the right batteries, and I think we're good.
Well, keep me informed, Clarissa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Moving on, ROC 2022-35, Resolution 2022-09, modifying local income tax rates, annual allocation to township fire safety agencies. As you will recall, we had discussed this previously as well. This is an item that the council handles every year at this time. We had the existing lit rates, proposed lit rates, and then we have, as you'll see on page 78, the proposed distribution amounts for each of the service providers in the fire protection districts. there any questions, comments, concerns about any of that? Excuse me. The distribution, it's, I believe everybody agreed upon at the last meeting of discussion was the 65-35 split. That is what we have done historically. If there are any concerns about that or any discussion regarding something contrary to that, we could hear it this time. If not, it will be available to act on at next week's meeting. Here's everyone is fine with what we have before us. So moving on, ROC 2022-32 courts, resolution 22-10, council support to expand courts. I believe there's some attendants that would like to speak.
Now, wait a minute, you said, does somebody like to speak? No, but I will.
thought you always like to
okay?
speak, Judge.
Okay, I'm Chris Newton. I'm the judge of Vigo Superior Court 4, and for this year, I'm the chief judge of the Vigo courts. I have with me today our circuit court slash Vigo Superior Court 3 judge, Sarah Mullican, our Division 6 judge, Michael Lewis. Also in support today, we have Noah Gamble, who is president of the Terre Haute Bar Association, and our Senator, John Ford, has just been great here and very supportive in this endeavor, and we appreciate that. We've also talked with our state representatives, and we feel that they'll be committed to this too. As I said to you in a previous meeting, when you look at all 92 counties in our state, Vigo County ranks third as far as need for a new court. The main thing driving this is in our juvenile system. There's just been an explosion of cases, and it just takes too long. I know they're working very hard there. And I know Judge Mullican has taken on some of those cases. Our magistrate, our commissioner, formerly known as Judge Adler, has taken on the 4D support cases. Our senior judge, Bruno, has taken on many of the cases, but she's going to retire at the end of this year. And so we really need to do some things to try to get people into court quicker and just make things more efficient. And so that is our proposal. Of course, this is driven by the legislature, and they would have to approve this. What we are asking you for is a letter of support in this quest, and if we have that, we feel we can move ahead. The earliest that this could be in the works would be July of this coming year. It could go to the next year. Now, in our proposal, we did put the salaries for a bailiff, also 2 court reporters. I think, in speaking to the other judges, we could probably have 1 for that. So it's really not an appropriation at this time, but it's just a commitment from you to say, hey, we're all in on this, and this is what we want to do, this is what we need to do to bring a more efficient justice here in our county. So, do you have any questions for me or for my colleagues?
Thank you, Judge. Any questions from council? Councilwoman Thies?
In working with youth compared to the adults that are in the court system, can you share what the benefit is about getting them through the courts faster and a more timely rate with
It's
support?
not just, I think most people, when they think about the courts, they think about the criminal system. But with juvenile court, that handles all of the paternity actions. People that are not married but have children, they all go through the juvenile court, which is under the circuit court. And our proposal would be to change the names from Superior to Circuit Court, Circuit Courts 1 through 7. We just think it will be easier, it'll be more efficient. It's just confusing even for attorneys to figure out when something should be filed in, do I use the Circuit Court cause number, or is it, Division 3? But to your question, it's more than just the criminal side. There's so many on the civil side, and it might take months. I don't know, Sarah, you might be able to answer, but I was told that it might be, if you had a custody case, that it might be March or April. If you had one right now, that would be March or April before you could get into court.
And I guess that's where I was going
Am I
to.
right with that, or?
I mean, I think
Both
with regard
sides,
to
yeah.
juvenile court CHINS cases, which are the child and
Yeah.
youth services
Right.
cases,
Yes.
are what have dominated the docket lately. And of course, there's statutory deadlines that have to be met. They have to be heard in a certain amount of time, the terminations as well as the CHINS, fact-finding and so forth. So the practical fact is it leaves a lot less time for other things.
Right.
Custody cases, the paternities, delinquencies and things like that.
And-
And the rise in CHINS cases is statewide.
And looking at it too from the family side of it though, I mean, having it go that long, I mean, that leaves a lot of
Absolutely.
question too. And that's kind of where I was going. I knew it was both sides, but looking at it to benefit children, to benefit the families, get the services as
And
much as
especially if
possible.
you're ordered to have children, or have your children for, visitation, not you have children. Boy, the Etlings and I took that seriously, But, no, if you can't get into court, and you're supposed to have them, it's just very frustrating.
Right.
Noah, were you gonna say something?
I am currently the president of the Terre Haute Bar Association, but I also serve as an attorney for the Department of Child Services. Today was I wanted to report, today was as bad as I've ever seen it. I had a hearing that was supposed to start at 1:30. At 2 o'clock, they were still finishing the morning docket with very little breaks. There were approximately 50 people still waiting to be seen on both the morning and afternoon docket. The morning docket was not done until 2:35 in the afternoon. I can tell you that for the attorneys in the Bar Association, that this is, for us, it's considered, at least by the board of the Bar Association, as a need, not a want. It delays justice not only for the parents, but for the kiddos, for foster care parents, for CASA. And so we are very much in support of this, and we hope you all would too. For example, there were some folks that drove from Bloomington to come to a hearing today, and because of the delays and because of the sheer numbers of cases that we had on the docket today, they could not stay for their hearing date and had to drive back to Bloomington. And it's an unfortunate, but to give the time and attention that these cases need, especially when it comes to these CHINS cases, and Judge Kelly is doing the best that he can, but there's just a sheer number that we unfortunately have in Vigo County. We definitely need something like this.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Wilson?
Just from a are you any closer?
Well, we would not have any input, I suppose, as to that. Perhaps Senator Ford might care to answer that. But because we as judges are state employees, and then our employees, while they're with us, they're county employees, and that too creates some confusion and sometimes some unnecessary bad feelings. And, we don't intend that, but, that's just the nature of it. I'm, for one, think that the court should be under, under the state. Although the county still, with the commissioners and you, would still have to provide us a place to hold court. I just think that it would be a better and more efficient way to do things. But I don't know, Senator, I don't know if that's that's been discussed at all, and we're putting you on the spot here, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Mr. President, members of the council, John Ford, Indiana State Senate, District 38. The topic has come up every budget session for the past few years, but I think there's from the General Assembly standpoint, there is some want to make sure that the counties have some skin in the game. So that's where it has failed in the past. But I'm sure it will come up again at the next budget session, which will be in January. But in terms of this request, you know, what the judges are asking for is really step one. And we have a very thorough process. We don't take it lightly to create another court. And so this is really just step one. And then there's a summer study committee that'll be later in the fall that will look at all the courts and what we need to do for a plan. Then it has to go through the whole budget process next year. So it's not anything we take lightly, but this is the first step that would need to be taken. And I think one advantage with their request is a lot of the infrastructure is already there. You know, we, a few years ago, put another court in Sullivan County. They had to do construction to build that courtroom, and that is not needed in this request.
Councilman Thacker?
Yeah, thank you for coming in and explaining this to us. And from what I gather, we're looking for support, and I know we can't do that tonight. We're just discussing it. But I, for one, am supportive of the effort, and that you have the judges here is even though they're not getting a citation or for a medal or anything, that they're working on their badge. But that I'm very supportive of that, and I hope, and it's good to see that you're working through the State House to get some legislation move forward on this.
We do get to wear a nice dress to work, though. All right. Anything else?
I don't believe so.
Robe, that is.
I'm familiar, yes.
All right. I'm going to be out of state next week. Would you like us to have a representative here? We'll try to prepare a letter for you. If you're so inclined to sign, we certainly appreciate your support in this. And do you
Yes.
want us to have someone here?
Yeah, are there any overriding concerns from council at this point? I mean, I think there have been conversations leading up to this anyway, and this isn't something that we were blindsided with. We were aware that this was coming, so I think everybody's familiar with it and appears to be comfortable with it. So I don't believe we need to have representation here for the next meeting.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Judge Newton, real quick, you'd mentioned you'd prepare a letter. We have a resolution that would be put
Good.
before the council.
You're on it.
So,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
all right.
All
I
right.
guess if you still want a letter, you can have
No,
that as
no,
well.
no.
So, okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Now have ROC 2022-37, Council Review of Estimated Property Tax Limits and Circuit Breakers for 2023. You have information. So we have information page 36 of our book. Well, some inserts that were not in the book as well. And so you please look at that information, and I would open the floor for any comments from council at this time. We'll just open the floor for general discussion. Councilman Wilson?
Just as a basic coverall comment, these numbers are kind of scary, which makes it all the more critical that we are fine-tuning budget for next year. And that's what the Budget Committee is trying our best to do. And these numbers make it even more necessary to do that.
Mr. President,
Councilman Wager?
I think our county assessor, Kevin Gardner, prepared some numbers this evening that might take away our hyperventilation a little bit.
I hope so.
I do too.
Council President, Council, although I'm the assessor and this is kind of, I don't mean to step on anybody's toes, Cliff and I had been into some communications with the numbers that the DLGF had given as proposals for cap losses. I did contact the DLGF to basically ask what formula they used to come up with their projection. I was told that they just use historical data. The only main issue they do is they use the previous year's net assessed value with whatever new calculations or changes that are going on. By doing that, that's when they came up with the number that they gave. I took from 2018 to 2023, 2018 to 2022, anything on your list that's not in yellow, because I put a sheet in front of each person. If it's not in yellow, those are factual numbers. So that's historical data we can use. I use that, anything that's in yellow, I back those numbers in to fill those values in. By doing that, I can show what the 2023 NAV should be, and now this is also based off of historically how much the NAV is of the gross assessed value. If we can back that number in, we can also see historically what the cap loss usually is as a percentage of the net assessed value. If I use those percentages, you'll see the actual under cap loss is the 7.7 instead of the projected 10.9. Over to the far right, I also took it out, made a total cap circuit breaker loss, did that as a percentage of the levy. So historically, you're seeing it's roughly 18.9% of whatever your levy is normally what your loss is. So if you bring that down, I did an average there because 2022 was a higher number. If you do an average, it puts it at 7.5, which is actually a little bit less of a loss than last year. If you do the expected, which is what I think it probably is going to be closer to, puts you at 8.4. If I do worst case scenario, so I take the 2022, which was a huge jump, it went from 18.9% of the levy to 21.6. So that's 3 points. So if I add the 3 points and say it's going to make another jump like that, which I can't see it doing, but if, let's say it does, that puts you at a worst case of 9.6. These are just numbers I gave, something for you to look at, because again, they based their numbers off of last year's gross assessed value. Because of the new cost tables we were given by the state, we're looking at about a $440 million increase in gross assessed value. So if you just keep backing that up, create your net assessed value, create your loss versus levy, I think realistic numbers is going to be about 8.4. The previous year it was a 7.8, so you're looking at just under an extra $1 million cap loss. Your levy looks, my projection is the levy is going to be about $3 million more than it was last year. Instead of 36.1, it should be around 39.0. Again, these are projections, which is the same thing DLGF does. I mean, they're doing projections based off the data they've got. I had a little bit more data, so I went a step farther using the current gross assessed values.
If we were trended back maybe 5 years to see what, for each year, what DLGF had projected and what it actually was, to see how close we really are in the end?
Well, that's on here. It's, the DOJ projected, pretty much every year they were roughly $1 million over, except 2022 was the anomaly.
Right.
They projected 6.6 and it was 7.8. So off to the right I did, the projected versus the levy.
So that's what that is there. Okay.
Yes, that's, and it was usually right around 21%. In '23, I even took that up to 28% based on their projections, which still would have put you at a roughly a 7.8 because of the increase in net assessed value. When I did speak with, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, it's the same one you spoke with.
Fred Bendorf.
Fred did tell me, he said, yes, historically, when your net assessed value goes up, your cap loss should go down, which is what it would indicate with that yellow actual for '23. But I also didn't want you to bank it on that because you're at a 5% growth quotient, which is higher than it's ever been. So that's the reason I took it out to the expected. I've got up the 8.4. Projections is really is the only thing anyone can do. So I just figured if we go back from 2018 to 2022, we had a lot of actual data there. I projected this 2 or 3 different ways, and it still came right around 8 million is what I projected was going to be the expected loss. On this one, I've got 8.4.
Questions for council? Comments?
Thank you.
Not touched by anybody, so-
Did you have, I know, Melissa, you'd been in discussions with BLGF too. Did you have
Yes.
anything additional?
I spoke with Fred Bendorf as well, and I spoke with him yesterday afternoon. And while I agree that there's percentages in Evan's calculations that can or cannot be considered a trend, but my concern is that there's too many unknowns with any of the gross assessed value to determine what the tax cap loss is. Because within that gross assessed value, you don't know how much of it's exempt property, don't know how much of it's in the 1% bucket, the 2% bucket, or the 3% bucket that further goes in to determine what your tax cap loss is. You don't know whether, you know, cause it could be homesteaded property or not homesteaded, so you don't know if it's 1 or the 2%. You know, when I look at the trends, and in 2022, the gross assessed value went up by 100,000. But then you go to the net assessed value, and it went down by 56,000, or 56 million. Sorry, millions, not thousand. And so to me, that concerns me that if we're trending downward, that only you would expect your cap loss to go up. So I guess in theory, what I'm trying to tell you is you cannot look at gross assessed value and say that it went up, so automatically our net assessed value went up. And, you know, as I've said before, do I agree with their numbers? No, I think they're high. But am I comfortable enough with any sort of calculation that we can come up with to say that you should go less? No. Because I would not want to be the one to say, oh, it's only going to be, you know, 8 or 9 million, and then it comes in at 10, and we've created problems with ourselves. We funded a budget that, or passed a budget that we can't fund without dipping into our operating balance more than you have to. So, and the other thing is that you don't know what all the other taxing units are doing. And what the other taxing units do within the county determines what our loss is going to be. Because when there's a loss in, whether it's Pearson Township or Nevins Township, we get a part of that loss. Because we have a part of that tax rate. We get a part of every loss in every township. So, with the bulk of it being in Harrison or the city attorney.
Yeah, if we can, I appreciate your input on it, and I agree that, it sounds like both of you agree that their number's too high. So, but to come up with trying to get a realistic number, that was my issue with actuarials, Baker Tilly. They wanted to cut us on the income and high on the expenses, so we had in my opinion, unrealistic projection. I like a projection that I can have it justify, and so I would ask, I appreciate Kevin's input, and I would like to see what the auditor would comment on the two sets of numbers you see in front of us here. Oh, okay, well, then that's fair, and then so maybe then before the, and I don't want to put you on the spot now, but if you have an opportunity to look at that before next week's meeting, I would appreciate that. That's all I'm saying, is because I don't disagree that they're probably high, but I get what you're saying is we're trying to be, as a budget, be good with the members' or with the taxpayers' money.
And I think you could make a better decision if we had the net assessed values, certified net assessed values, which we don't have those yet. So that's a big jump going from gross to net, and they both play a role, but with your net assessed value, if it drops, your tax rate goes up. And the thing of it is, you need to have enough growth in your assessed value to offset a 5% increase in your levies.
In your levies. So, yeah, that's what I would just say.
And
is
I think if you went through and looked, we've never had that type of increase in our assessed values.
The historical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilman Wilson?
Just to bounce off of what Councilman Thacker said, with regard to Baker Tilly's, are they going to redo that? Because like I mentioned in that meeting, they didn't take into account the fact that we're at 9% inflation
They presented
either.
another one, I don't think I have it with me. They presented a second draft and I emailed it to you.
Oh.
And that's been 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, I'm not sure. But they took into account for inflation, and then I even contacted them about a couple of the numbers that need to be adjusted. They seem to be a little bit, maybe the revenue was in the wrong account or something like that. I can't remember exactly without going to my notes. But the other thing is, if you look at that, which I have the first draft, but I don't have the second, another concern would be that they include tax caps. And if tax caps are going up like what they're anticipating, then that means that our projections are going to get worse because they did not include enough. So, and I believe in the latest draft, the general fund was showing a decrease in the operating balance of $3 million a year for 22, 23, and 24. Approximately.
Could I have Calista say that again, please? So for the operating balance, if we continue as it is, 3 million a year.
Is reduced 3 million a year.
And what, do we know what our operating balance is
Right now,
I know I should, but
now I can tell you what they had it at the end of this year. Cause I got the first
that's
draft.
what I was thinking.
Let's see, 21 was 24,281,000. And that's for the general fund only.
That was in 2021.
Because the first draft showed it'd be changing more drastically, but there was some revenues that they did not have in there
Okay, thank you.
as a reimbursement to the county that they did not include from the public safety, I believe.
And I just want to say I appreciate all of you, because being on the budget committee, I think a lot of times with the committee, we make the decisions on, how to kind of make priorities and use things, and having your guys' knowledge and including Kevin in on that and the auditor's office really helps us, and I know I appreciate that. It's a lot to learn, and we're lucky. A lot of you have many years of experience and training, so thank you.
Questions? On, those numbers include, like, the CARES Act fund in the,
Yes.
so it's even worse.
Well, it included CARES funding that was deposited into the general fund.
Which would-
Not ARP.
No,
Because
CARES,
it's in
yeah,
a separate
CARES.
fund.
But still, that's an anomaly. That's not something that we need to say is always in the
You would
operating
have
fund.
an inflated revenue
That's, yeah.
in 2020 or 21, whenever we deposit that in the general fund.
That's the point I was trying to make. Thank you.
And one other thing that they did not decide to put in there was a casino, and because it's not here yet, so.
The other thing with that, which I don't know which fund that would go into. I'm not familiar with which fund. If we were to receive a when we receive casino distributions, I don't know if it would go into a separate fund or if it would be put in the general fund. So I don't know if Jim knows that, No.
And that's not forthcoming for a while.
Not till they start pulling the slots, I guess.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from council? So we have a robust amount of information here from page 36 to 73 in our book. I would just ask that the minutes reflect that we have discussed the calculations here on the estimated maximum levy for budget year 2023. We've reviewed everything and just asked that the auditors send the information off to the taxing units so they're aware of what we have for consideration before us. Is there anything else from council?
Do we been getting the certified net assessed values? The certified net assessed values, do we have when do we normally
Well,
have those?
they're required, the deadline for the state is August 1. And I know they're pushing hard to get counties to meet that, but I don't believe certified yet. And I don't know if you have a projected date. Do you, Jim?
Anything else from council? Moving on, ordinances relating to appropriations. Additional appropriation 2022-22, ROC 2022-29, Public Defender.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to come address you. We are asking for an additional appropriation of $20,000 that would come out of the Public Defender Fee Fund, which is the supplemental, not out of the general fund. We are in the position that by May, when we wrote the letter, we anticipated that we were going to be mid-year in needing more funds. And if we use what you currently see in supplemental of a budget of $10,000 still left and the $3,000 still left in general, we will still have to transfer money from 300 series to pay the bills we have currently for the experts we've had for trials, and we have interpreters that come out of there, medical records that come out of there, mental health assessments that come out of that fund. It's our big fund. So we are asking for the appropriation of $20,000 to get us through the rest of the year. I will say in our 2023 budget, we did reflect that we felt that $50,000 was needed instead of the $40,000 we have been getting, because the last 2 years have reflected that we have spent around closer to $50,000. And anticipate that that will continue to be the amount even when we delve into the supplemental account, which is generated by fees.
Thank you. Questions from council? Questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate correction.
Thanks.
Next, we have additional appropriation 2022-23 ROC 2022-31, Vigo County Health Department.
Joni Wise, Administrator, Vigo County Health Department, requesting an additional appropriation for repairs and maintenance and in freight. And this would be for the refurbishing of our XRF machine that we use to do lead testing in our case management for children with elevated blood lead levels. And it's a radioactive isotope machine that we can use to go into homes and find out if there's lead paint, where the source of lead paint is, or whether it's in the soil. Elevated blood lead levels are reportable in the state of Indiana to the local health department. And when they come into us, the nurses or the clinical division takes the clinical piece and works with the families and providers. And then the environmentalists worked to figure out the source of lead contamination. So it's a very important tool in our ability to do our work.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Councilman Wilson?
Is there's something wrong with it that you need to repair it? Did it break or?
Doesn't need repaired, it just needs to be refurbished. Yeah, there's some dialogue that are in your packet between our environmental health specialist supervisor and the company regarding how often it has to be. I'm going to use the refurbished. I don't know if that's the right word. The environmental supervisor is supposed to be here this evening and had a reason why she couldn't be.
Thank you.
Yes, it says here it requires resourcing every 2 to 3
Yes,
years.
resourcing, that's
That
the
was the
word.
word you're looking
I knew
for.
it started with an R.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Any additional questions or comments from council? Thank you, Joni.
Okay, I do have one question
Sure.
for you. When you do get to the part of the agenda where we're talking about gasoline, there will be no action on that tonight, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Because I had information about what our bills have ran the last 2 months, which is $4,000 a piece versus what was on the, okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yes, you are correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have reduction of appropriation 2022-01, ROC 2022-33, Supplemental Juvenile Probation Department, and reduction of appropriation 2022-02, ROC 2022-31, Drug Court. And I believe Councilman Thompson was going to speak on this topic. So in his absence, I think Calissa is going to take the floor on it.
During the review of the 2023 budget and the revenue streams, it was determined in the Supplemental Juvenile Probation Fund that their revenue stream was not as originally projected, and they were going to have possible difficulties funding not only, they can fund this year, but they would not be able to continue to fund 2023. So part of the solution was to reduce the appropriations for 2022 that would leave funds available that were not earmarked, that they could be used for the 2023 budget. And I had worked with Ellen and Deb Kessler to determine the numbers and the counts.
Questions from council? Councilman Wager?
Well, the drug court's on the next page. No. Okay. This will not affect it at all.
So this is regarding the resolution on page 84. I'm sorry, the ordinance, page 84. So no questions or comments about that. So I believe, Councilman Wager, yours will be on page 85.
And this is a similar situation, and it was determined that, based on historical expenditures, the contract, that particular account was over appropriated. So that they looked at it and felt like they could reduce both 22 and 23 to help with the fund. The drug court's revenue stream is quite a bit lower than what was originally projected.
And I know that's been a topic of discussion during the budget hearings. Do we have any sense of a way to resolve that as of yet? Councilman Woodson?
One thing that Judge Sheehan mentioned was that the numbers of their revenue were down because in many instances, their people that are in the program may have multiple cases. So when they go to pay their drug court fees, not always the case that the drug court fees are applied to is pulled up in the clerk's office. So those funds may have been appropriated to court fees or probation fees rather than the drug court fees. And once they've been sent to those other areas, they can't get them back. And so I think they're working together, trying to come up with a solution with the clerk's office to make and I don't know if they're working with IT as well, but to make it to where the case that has the drug court fees attached to it can be the primary court case, so that's the first thing that pops up, so that there's no confusion about where the money should be applied, because many times, as is human nature, they'll just come in and say, I need to pay my court fees. They don't necessarily say drug court fees, so it's not always understood that that's where the money should go. So I think they're trying to work together with the clerk's office to make sure that the revenues for drug court are applied to drug court.
So have we discovered how much of a shortfall that is because of that accounting process of the funds coming in?
I don't know that, they didn't give us a number of what
They just recently
they
figured
feel
out
was
that's what-
misapplied. But I know as of mid-July, I want to say their revenues for the year was just over $8,000.
Just 8,000, where it was like 34,000 previous.
But it was only $8,000 plus the 100,000 county contribution. And I believe is like $150-ish thousand budget.
Did they provide an explanation as to why the practices changed year over year
The practice
of applying it to drug court instead of?
They just caught on to that was the reason why, because they were confused as to why, and they were actually going to each person in the program and saying, why haven't you paid your drug court fees? We have. Well, then they went back and traced it, and they found that the amounts that they paid were applied to other adult probation or court fees. And I think Judge Sheehan said he was working with adult probation to see if there's a way that they could kind of reimburse drug court for the amount, because the clerk can't come back and reassign it. So they were trying to get, and I don't know how recently, but I think he did say they just recently figured out that that's what was happening. And I don't know that it's a $26,000 difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's baffling to me. Is it a change of employees from one year to the next and the practice changes? I mean, that's what's concerning.
Exactly.
It might be maybe it's just a simple training issue.
And the training within the clerk's office as well, to maybe to just ask, what specific court fees are you paying with this,
Yeah.
this amount that you're paying?
I'm not familiar with the system they use, but I don't know if they can set up a hierarchy that, you know, and I don't know how that works.
If this case number
Judge,
is,
but there
includes
should
drug
be some
court,
sort of
then
hierarchy.
these are
that
all
they get applied here
subsidiary.
first, here next. Yeah, but I don't know, apparently that's not in place or was not being followed. I don't know. I don't know all the specifics.
Councilwoman Thies, did you have something you wanted to add?
You know, he had talked about, you know, I think it was just kind of, it surprised him because he knew that people were paying. And they had, I think at some point had it said that their numbers of people who are actually contributing were actually going up, but then it didn't match up. And I think that's kind of how they found it. So I think that was a process. I mean, we've looked, we haven't completed that part of it officially yet, but we've looked very carefully and have tried to find ways to support them and help them and kind of talk through some things as well.
But to your point, I'm sorry.
You're fine, I'm done.
To your point, the change in leadership in the drug court, prior to that, it seemed that it ran smoothly. I don't know what the change was.
Maybe it's
That's
just a
a good-
simple training
that's a good
issue
question.
with new employees. Hopefully, something very simplistic. Okay. All right. Anything further? Nope. Moving on, additional appropriation 2022-24, ORC 2022-34, Commissioners ARPA Fund.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Eric Perry. I'm the Director of Government Relations at RJL Solutions. Here tonight at the request of the Vigo County Commissioners to outline priorities in the process for these ARPA funds, priorities as established before today, as well as a specific appropriation request for a certain amount of these ARPA funds. There we go. Okay. I'm joined tonight by Victoria Meyer. She's our Vice President of Communications and available to answer any questions should I not be able to. Before I go in, just to outline the quick agenda for today, again, here's what I'll be going over. Again, just to provide an overview for what has been done today, what ARPA is for those who might be unfamiliar, just re-identification of what the county has established as some of their priority initiatives at a high level. Before going into a discussion of their current allocation request, I'm joined today by Larry Robinson, the county engineer, and then Jason Soderlund from RQAW to discuss more in detail these projects specifically. And then at the very end, I'd be happy to answer any questions from you all. So just to recap as to what has been the process so far and what the American Rescue Plan Act is. Vigo County received $20 million, roughly $20 million.76 in ARPA funds, and these funds can be used to identify and respond to impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. It must be obligated before December of 2024 and then spent before December of 2026. In identifying these projects, ARPA recipients must undergo the following two steps to ensure compliance with these ARPA eligibility requirements. That is to identify a specific public health or economic impact that stemmed from the COVID-19 pandemic, and then a designed response that directly addresses or responds to that said impact. Within ARPA, there are 6 buckets, if you will, of eligibility They are responding to the public health emergency, assistance to families and households, assistance to small businesses, nonprofits, and impacted industries, effective government service delivery, lost public sector revenue, and then finally, public infrastructure. So to just briefly outline the process to date, upon passage of the American Rescue Plan Act, conversations began immediately to preliminarily identify eligible uses that aligned within the community's needs. And I say preliminarily because the final rule was not adopted until April of this year, meaning that the final guardrails were not set, so it was still kind of wavy at that point. At the beginning of this process, the county commissioners identified Baker Tilly as their experts regarding what would be eligible and what would be in compliance with ARPA requirements. And then, as I mentioned, the final rule was adopted in April of this year. So in consultation with the Department of Treasury, real conversations began with both the city and county elected officials to best prioritize dollars that were allocated to both the city and the county to maximize outcomes and then to eliminate redundancies and fund allocations. Essentially meaning there that, if the county had one initiative and the city had a similar initiative, how to best target resources there, not to spend $2 on the same thing. And our jail's role in all this, we facilitated meetings with city and county council members, with the mayors and commissioners, again, really just to align everyone's efforts and ensure that this process was efficient and dollars were put towards projects in an efficient manner. So at this point, the county and the city both have begun to identify which projects each entity will fund. And then as of today, the county commissioners have identified 2 specific initiatives for your consideration today. These projects, as identified, uniquely meet ARPA eligibility requirements, and furthermore will have an immediate impact on the community in the sense that they're county-specific projects. They don't require extensive collaboration with community stakeholders, further conversations, further details to be ironed out, and they're projects that can be begun pretty soon from this point onwards. So now I'd like to just kind of recap what the priority initiatives are, as has been established through conversations between the commissioners and you all, through conversations with the mayor, and kind of this whole process to identify what really the county would like to spend these ARPA dollars on. Keep in mind that each of these concepts, aside from the 2 specific initiatives that I'll detail towards the end of this presentation, will require extensive collaboration between you all, between the commissioners, and between members of this community. So these are pretty high level and general ideas and need to be further defined really to get towards their completion. They need more details and further refinement there. I'm going to be talking about them in the lens of each of the 6 buckets just to kind of help you visualize where these dollars kind of fit into eligibility requirements. So first, under responding to the public health emergency bucket, the county has identified 2 main priorities here. First one being the establishment of preparedness programs and resources to better prepare the county for further future health emergencies and pandemics. In addition, they also identified that increased access to mental health services in the county was a huge priority for all people involved in these conversations. And so the following list is just some initial ideas. I do have to note that just based on how the money might be allocated, these all might not be funded through ARPA. We'd have to find additional funding mechanisms to fund programs of this nature. But some mental health services that could be funded through ARPA would be comprehensive services to prevent incarceration, crisis care, suicide prevention programming, drug rehabilitation, and then enhanced mental health resources for students within the county. And again, just to reiterate here, it's very high level at this point. I know you're thinking where might further details be. These will require further conversations with people who are already doing stuff like this within the community to really figure out what would be effective use of these dollars to maximize, 1, your investment as the fiscal body of this county, but 2, also to get the best outcomes for people of Vigo County. Under the second bucket of assistance to families and households, county has identified that one priority would be to establish programs to increase access to affordable and attainable housing. But something to keep in mind here is what there's no specific initiative at this point is that the state is really working hard, as well as the Wabash River Regional Development Authority. They have programs at this point to increase access to affordable and attainable housing. Specifically Homes for the Future, which is a new initiative that was allocated $1.8 million to entice local and regional builders to build homes within the county. Furthermore, there are a couple of housing studies going on, really kind of refine what the exact needs are. One's being conducted through the state, and the other's being conducted through West Central, and that will allow the county to kind of better understand the current climate and really where the pathway forward is. In addition, another program that is a priority program would be resources to address food deserts and food insecurity within the community. And finally, programs to increase access to affordable childcare and early childhood learning facilities for this county's workforce. Under the third bucket, if you will, assistance to small businesses, nonprofits, and impacted industries. What was prioritized here under this bucket is the establishment of some form of grant program to aid organizations whose needs were unmet by previous COVID-19 funding programs. So that being, obviously a lot of money came from the state and federal government to, for example, assist the tourism industry. So this would target other industries whose needs have been unmet to this point, really to direct dollars to those who have not received help yet from this pandemic. And so under, just to make note of this, under the final ARPA rule, funds from this bucket may be provided to organizations to address payroll and benefits, the cost of attracting and retaining employees, as well as operating costs. In these grant programs, while still in the infant stages of development here, the vision here is that these grant programs would be administered by a third party who really understands how to, one, do this, but then two, who needs the help and how to get the dollars quickly as possible to them. And again, this would require intensive community collaboration among stakeholders to really figure out how to best use these dollars moving forward. Under the fourth bucket is the effective government service delivery. So think about transparency between your constituents, the community members, and then you as the elected officials within the county. This could be through purchase of equipment to enhance access and then better virtual capabilities, such as cameras, recording systems, and whatnot, as well as resources to improve these communications between you all as elected officials within the community and the people that you represent and serve. And then finally, under this bucket, another initiative here would be programs to build awareness around the services that government does offer to the public, as there is some lack of knowledge amongst the community as to what all government can be doing for people and what services are available to them in certain situations. Under the next bucket of lost public sector revenue, this is, for those who are familiar with the process, this is the $10 million that the county took, so it's 10 of the $20 million here. And this is to address lost public sector revenue. It's a little bit more broad in this usage here than some of the other categories as to what it can be used for. And so some of the priorities that have been established here are improvements to the county transportation infrastructure system. So with that being said, county roadways that are deteriorating, some highly traveled roadways that need improvements and safety upgrades, as well as resources for improved public safety equipment and infrastructure, such as radios for the fire department and EMS providers. And then finally, improvements to accessibility, safety, and security features for local government buildings. And then under the sixth bucket of these ARPA eligibility requirements is public infrastructure. So part of the priority initiatives that have been identified through this process so far are programs to improve water and sewer infrastructure within the county, that being like drainage, ditching, and culvert replacements and improvements, as well as stormwater improvements. And then another thing to note here, as that's been established in these prior conversations about what is going to take priority here in the county, utilizing some of these ARPA resources to expand upon recent progress to upgrade broadband infrastructure here in Vigo County. But I would like to say here that there are already some ongoing projects that these dollars would supplement, not necessarily create separate programs, but using these dollars to best enhance what's already going on. So if you're aware, there's the Next Level Connections program from the state of Indiana. So thanks to the commitment of some GEARS dollars from the county, the community via Joint recently received an additional grant funding from the state to further expand broadband access into unserved and underserved areas. And then in addition, as I mentioned, the GEARS funding, which is near completion, but it has had some success in establishing additional areas, fiber for further expansion into residential areas. So with those both being said, these programs would allow the county to consider additional funding opportunities to really increase what's going on here in terms of broadband connectivity. And then finally, there are, through these conversations, a lot of priorities have been established, and there certainly are some that may not initially fit into some of these 6 umbrella bucket categories, but they're still nonetheless very important to the county and to the community at large. And so both the city and county, through this whole process of figuring out what is priority for us, they have gone through and they have identified these additional projects that have the potential to be funded with non-ARPA dollars, meaning other grant programs elsewhere, other funding mechanisms, et cetera. And so should these outside funding opportunities prove insufficient, there might be an opportunity to use ARPA funds for certain portions to bridge any funding gaps that might exist. And we just put a couple on here. There's certainly a whole comprehensive of what other priority initiatives there are that are important to you all as a council, that are important to the commissioners. The community center and athletic facility is one of them, the community water park and splash facility, campground and dresser, improvements to the county parks. There's a lot of things that are very important to the progress in this county and to really creating a place that people want to stay, live, and have as their homes. And so there's a whole list. We couldn't include it all today just for the sake of space on this slide, but I would be best not to mention all those others. So that is just a very broad overview of what some of the priority initiatives are that have been established to this point. And like I said, they're very high level. They will require further conversations amongst you all, amongst the commissioners, amongst community members, to really flesh out what those projects look like, what they mean, who they're going to go to, and how the dollar is going to be best used. But today, I have the opportunity to present 2 specific funding requests to you all that can be accomplished fairly immediately without extensive community collaboration, without extensive conversations. These are projects that the county can accomplish pretty soon should you grant this request for funding. So the first overall build of projects have to deal with water and sewer infrastructure. The county commissioners, in conjunction with the county engineers, have identified 17 sub-projects, if you will, that will have an immediate impact on the community. And I believe Larry should have passed out a handout to you all, and I'll let him speak on this in 1 second. There are pipe and structural replacements in there, infrastructure improvements, replacement of failed systems, et cetera, that are estimated to cost $2,104,412. And with that, I'll turn it over to Larry if you have any specific questions as to these 17 sub-projects, which are outlined right here.
I just have a question. Can we get a copy of the?
We can, yeah, we can share that with you, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Mr. President, members of council, Larry Robbins, View County Engineer. So I'm here to break down the request for the $2,100,000, like Eric mentioned. I did hand you out a binder or a booklet that has all the information here. In that, you will have a copy of this slide, which is the breakdown of all the projects with the total cost, with material, labor, equipment, and the total cost broken out. The second page of that is culverts to be replaced. This sheet here actually come in 2020. We had all of our small structures inspected, and a small structure as defined by federal highway and the state is anything 4 feet and up to 20 feet. Anything 20 feet, anything spans 20 feet and above is considered a bridge. So we have roughly 200 bridges in the county, small structures, so everything smaller than that down to 4 feet. We have 227 of those structures. That is the book there on the table. So that whole book is the inspection of all those. And this is the sheet they provide out of that book from those inspections. So these are culverts to be replaced. And these are anything basically a sufficiency rating less than 6, 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s are the ones that we really put priority on to try to get accomplished and try to get taken care of in a timely manner. The 2 that are crossed out in red are actually the responsibility. They are actually on the county line to the north, so they're the responsibility of Park Avenue. So I'll be in touch with those about getting those replaced. The ones in yellow are ones that we have already done with local forces that have already failed, if you will, to the point that they needed immediate attention. The ones highlighted in orange are all on this list here. So as you can see, I have a map. The next page would be a map identifying all of those projects, where they lay in the county, where they're at. You can see they're kind of just all over the place. I also have a larger map if you're interested, if you want to look at it after. It's a whole structure inventory. It's got our bridges and our small structures on it, as well as our bridge and culvert requests that we have here today. And then everything else is just backup material. You'll have a sheet for each of the structure numbers, along with accompanying pictures of the inspection reports the day they were inspected. So all of those, you should have a picture of some nice culverts. So with this request, this is what all of these funds will be, the material cost is something that the county would purchase. The labor and equipment is estimates based on contractors installing those. Most of these projects are too large for our own forces to do. They are pretty labor intensive. There's a lot of equipment, specialized equipment that's needed to remove some of these structures, and it does take quite a bit of time with our own forces. So as you can see, since 2020, there's only 3 that we've really accomplished. With everything else we got going on in the county, it's hard for us to get to these until we get to a project that we can take care of these. So with this request, we can address all of these projects, get really a big jump on this. The funding source for these, if it wouldn't be for this, would be a Cume Bridge Fund, which is already a pressured fund at this point with increases in costs, increases in that. So as you see, the first 2 are bridge projects that are on here. One is a recent change order we discovered for 13th Street over Lost Creek. The abutments were anticipated to be 12 inches thick. They were found, or 24 inches thick. They were found to be 12 inches thick. So we had to thicken that wall. Price of concrete, labor, and everything else, that's a $230,000 change order. So that's the request to kind of help offset that impact to Cume Bridge Fund. I've only get about a revenue stream less than $1 million in there a year, with a diminishing operating balance at this point because we've constructed a few bridges that needed taken care of here in the last couple of years. So the second item there is bridges 310A and B. Last fall, the estimate for that project was right around $600,000. We actually just opened a bid today, and we're lucky to get at least a successful bid that was close, but it was $840,000. The estimate had went up since all the increased inflation and everything else and labor rates. I had 8 contractors pick up plans, only 2 bid. So that's just kind of the nature of everything in the market that is out there. So the next bid, so the $841,000 was the low bid. The next bid was $1 million plus. So that is unfortunately the world that we live in right now, and one of the reasons that I felt, that the commissioners felt that this was a good request to get these projects. We can accomplish these projects now with today's dollars and not impact those with future funds, because as I input those out, if you extrapolate that out on 5 or 6 years, getting some of those projects completed, what that dollar amount is just going to continue to rise. So it's just going to cost the county more money. If there's an opportunity to do it now, it will benefit us in the long term. Any questions for that?
All right, so we assume those costs will go up over time, right? I mean,
correct.
We would hope that there's going to be, with everything, there's going to be some give at some point, and pricing decreases over time with all the external factors that are affecting that, correct?
Correct. So, I mean, time tells us the cost goes up anyway. Now, what we've seen over the last 6 to 8 months has been extreme.
Right.
It's affected projects across the board. It's affected contractors, bidding work, and everything else. So you're seeing there's so much work out there at this time. You're seeing increased rates or higher rates and higher bids just because of they don't have the manpower or the equipment to get everything done. So they throw a high number at it, and nobody else bids, and then they get it, and then that reflects your inflation rates. So some of that's, I believe it's going to come down, but time only tells us that everything costs more. So inflation is usually a 2 to 3% number, not quite a 8 to 9 or a 10% number, or even our asphalt cap price is 30%.
So do we have, I'm guessing not, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, do we have any estimations by or forecasts from industry experts on when this may let up, and a sense of what that may look like?
I do not. The experts that I've had conversations with over time say that, they don't anticipate any of this really leveling off for another year and a half, just because that's the revolution that it gets in. A lot of this is driven by NDOT projects and state projects, and those are usually year-long, 2-year-long projects. So by the time those get out, and if Community Crossings has flooded the market with construction, and there's a lot of dollars out there for this work. So unfortunately, I think, we're flooding the market with money and being able, to do these projects, but at the same time, we don't have enough contractors to do the work, so it's driving prices up, so we're not actually getting more done.
So I assume with that, these are projects that can't wait a year and a half to 2 years.
These are projects that have sufficiency rating, and you can look at some of the pictures. We go out and we make them as safe as possible. In some cases, These are narrow structures that have been hit by vehicles, guardrails broken off, things like that. A lot of the structures, the pipes, the bottom of the pipe is completely rusted out, it's gone. So that, at that point, there's really nothing we can do other than replace it. So once we get a washout on that, we're just filling it in just to maintain it so that we can keep going on. So, but we get a large rain event, a lot of those pop up around the county. My guys go out, they go around and fill the holes and make sure everything's safe, but those things are out there. I mean, we do the best we can to get them taken care of. But this is a pretty daunting number, and as you see on that list, there are several more on there that are going to be approaching that as well. So a lot of these projects are concrete box structures that were placed probably in the 40s and 50s in WPA times they're cracked and deteriorating, the concrete's spalled, all the rebar's exposed. So the longer those goes, we go through another winter cycle, and it shows itself more.
Councilman Thacker.
And I maybe missed that at the very beginning. You said the ranking on these are 1 through 6, and now is the page that you have displaying, those are all number ones? Is that what I understood?
No.
Or
So I did not put the sufficiency ratings are on there. None of them are number one. The number ones are immediate. We have to close the road.
And so that's what, so I just wanted
Correct.
to see if these were, what status these were.
Yeah,
And
so if you
said-
flip the next page, that's Culverts to Be Replaced, that's out of that book.
Yeah.
Those sufficiency, estimated overall rating is that sufficiency rating.
Yes.
And that's on a 1 to 10 scale, so these get, as they get to the bottom, they get into 5s and 6s, but
Right.
yeah,
Well,
everything we're
that's
taking
what I
care
was
of is
looking
a
for,
4.
if there were number ones or not, and then.
Unfortunately, number ones, they don't make the list because we close the road and then we have to fix
So
them at that time.
with that being said, and you're looking at, if you were to get this and infuse $2.1 million, and then on your projected 3 to 5 year budget that you've just submitted, is you're going to lessen that budget by $2 million?
No, that budget.
Yeah,
in
and
that-
that's what I'm asking, because
yes.
you have a bridge fund in there.
Yes, I do
And
have a
that
bridge fund in
you
there.
said had $1 million in it, but if we're projecting is, and you do the money here, then do you need it in the bridge fund?
Yes, I will still need that. So in the bridge fund, I'm trying to use that for bridge projects. These are small structures.
Small structure,
so,
okay. That's what I wanted to understand.
Yeah, for example, I mean, Bridge 322, which is the first one on the list, we talked about with the change order.
Yeah, that was just picking up that change order.
Yeah, so that bridge itself, just do that bridge rehab was at 1.5 million.
Yeah.
And then with the change order is 1.8, that's 2 years of my revenue stream gone.
Well, and
I do nothing else.
And I always appreciate your input on this. You're very prepared and have good material. And I also want to be honest with you is, I'll say this on a very high level, because that's what we got, was a high level. And that I don't have any interest funding anything until I fund everything. And I want to see a plan for the $20 million, not for $2 million. And that's not a reflection on the highway department or Larry. Is that understood?
Fair enough.
And that's just one person's opinion here. I want to see us make a biggest impact we can with this money, because I don't think we're going to see it every year. I have no expectations of that. But I do have expectations is we have to see what we need to do with it, the total impact. And if we start chipping away 10% of it right here, right? And not that I'm not saying it's not a good project, but I want to see how it prioritizes with everything else that we have. And that's there again, I just want to be honest and fair with you, Larry, because I feel like you always present a very good project, what your expectations, and come into it. So I wanted to be as equally honest.
No, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Thies.
I just wanted to clarify something, and it actually kind of relates to both the presentation and what you said. Under government service delivery, which was like I think you said the transparency component, like doing virtual capabilities, communication. I thought I heard you say that 10 million's already allocated to that. Did I hear that wrong?
10 million was for the lost public sector revenue,
For the
not for the effective government service delivery. So 10 million.
Okay, so I had it in the wrong one. Okay.
10 million of the 20 million was for you had to do a calculation, or you could take the blanket 10 million from the ARPA. So the 10 million was taken, and then there's an additional 10 point.
Okay, so it's a process, and that's okay. So really, that's going specifically, as I'm looking at it, infrastructure, safety, equipment, all that, and that's what we're talking. Is that where the engineer's project?
None of that's allocated.
That's not allocated, okay.
No, so the way they, if I understand it right, the way the ARP funding came out is you could take it and justify it. You had to put it in one of those buckets.
Okay.
And one of those buckets is the lost revenue and everything. And so that was justified, so that money is allocated to the county and unrestricted, if you will.
Okay.
Is just the other 10 million that's left, and then 2 million of it is in public infrastructure of the buckets.
Well, I think it's all lumped together. The 20 million all has to be, it all has to fit into one of those categories.
Right.
The 10 million is fitting into the category of the lost revenue.
So it's already in a category, is what I'm saying.
But it's not allocated towards anything. It all
No,
has to
no,
be
no,
part of
I
the
get
plan.
that, but it's in that category.
Yes,
It's
yes.
in that category.
Okay, and then the other thing, just more for my kind of comprehending, the book that has all the reviews of the, like, structures and things, was that something that an outside company did, or is that
Yes.
something that, okay, so that's kind of
Clark
their,
Dietz, yep.
that was their plan. And then for all the structures, and I think you answered it already, it sounds like unless it's an emergency, you gotta fix it, shut the road down, anything like that, this is all gonna be bid out. So
Correct.
there will be a bidding process where different company, I just wanna make that transparent for the,
Yep.
everyone who knows, it's not just gonna be like whoever just, gets the job. And so we'll try to get the best offering. And then, I think that's it. I had one more question I wrote down, but I can't understand what I wrote down, so, thank you.
Larry, what is the situation with contractors and so forth? I mean, we got the money, we got the problems, we got the list, so we bid it out. What's the hope in getting somebody that will do it?
Right now, these types of jobs, we've had pretty good response locally on the ones that we've had now. I will tell you, Bloomington Road, at the rail trestle there, we've already got bids on that, so that labor and equipment line was actually a bid from S&G.
And they're coming in on.
Yep, they've already got locates in. That's one that we have to move forward with, because that one, the pipe is gone. It's about 200 feet long. It runs across at an angle. And we've already got sinkholes on that one. So I can't wait on that one. I'm hoping we get funding, I can, allocate that out of, my bridge fund, but that one, we're not waiting on. So that's actual numbers. Like I said, the change order is actual numbers. The increase in cost is, something that we've looked.
And these are all contemporary figures.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
these are all, and like, Councilwoman Thie said, these are all gonna be projects that we bid out, or we take quotes on that. The county itself will purchase the material. Those are our bid prices for material this year. So that's how we come up with those numbers. And labor and equipment, we just looked at past jobs and then forecasted out some inflation numbers on there, talked to some contractors that are here locally, so that we can
good.
hopefully get a lot of this work done.
Excellent, thank you.
Just one more thing. We kind of bounced around here quite a bit. But getting back to that $10 million, I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that, because I think there was a little bit of confusion. And so everything has to fit into a bucket. The $10 million, is it proposed for lost revenue? Is that where we're at?
I think as I understand it, with the $10 million, with these other 5 buckets, if you will, you need to follow consultation with Baker Tilly. You need to follow a strict plan, if you will, to prove to the federal government that, hey, this is what we're using these dollars for, to the exact dollar amount. With this $10 million, it's already allocated to the county, and so you have a little bit more leeway with that one. But you could still use it for other projects, as I understand it, but you have a little bit more leeway in terms of how you spend it. But it's still part of the 20
So
million comprehensively.
so essentially that first 10 million can be used for just about anything.
I would have to, consult Baker and Tilly to make sure specifically, but as I understand it, there's more leeway in that than some of the other
Right.
buckets.
But right now, the proposed bucket, is it the lost revenue? I think that's kind of where the confusion was at. Is that what the proposal is at this time?
The 3 million, or the 2 million from this project?
No, the 10 million.
So this first 10 million, consulting with Auditor Bramble and Baker Tilly, we took as revenue loss. So when we got to the Riley Spur project earlier on, me and Brenda had a conversation about what fits as a normal county function and what does not. When we got to leasing things, it's not a normal county function, so Baker Tilly didn't see that as a good fit for ARPA money. So this first $10 million, we've identified these projects as something that we can take immediate action on. It's kind of a broad use of this first $10 million. And when it comes to a plan, that last $10 million, we have to have an A1 plan that we have to submit to the feds to get their approval on. So when it comes to, as we move forward with, and this is just high-level stuff, if there was the opportunity for an athletic facility or something like that, we have to have a conversation with you to okay it. Then we have to have a feasibility study to make sure we're not paying more than we need to for it. Then that has to come back. Then we have to get into design and engineering. So it's not something that's just going to take a short amount of time. I mean, it's going to be months long, and we have to have this expended by 2026. So while this first $3.2 million is a large chunk of this, this is something that benefits the county as a whole, especially with these drainage issues and our manpower issues. And then when we get to the building aspect, it's a security issue and ADA accessibility issue. But these are things that would normally take Larry and his crew 10 years to accomplish something on this list, or the items on this list that we're going to be able to accomplish in a year. Maybe longer, depending on workforce issues and stuff like that. Same thing with the entrance, something dating back to prior commissioners they've always wanted to do, but we've never really had the opportunity to have the funding to do something that big right now.
Right. And I asked the question because Councilman Thacker and I have talked about this, and I echo what he stated earlier. We don't have these opportunities all the time, correct? I want to make sure, from my perspective, that we have a broad sense of where we're going. As you know, my goal for many years has been an athletic facility here, much like we see in other parts of the state and the country, to bring more people in this community. I just want to make sure, it is my understanding that first $10 million, and we've got some confirmation here, can be used for a wide array of things. Yeah. Correct? I don't suggest this is unimportant, this 2.1, because it is important. We have to have infrastructure in place. If it falls apart, then we have a lot of problems. But I think we need to be cognizant of how we use that first $10 million with an overall plan, so that we still have a bite at the apple for something like an athletic facility, if that's what the council so chooses to fund.
Yeah.
Right?
And, yeah, just to kind of echo what Eric said, when it comes to some of these bigger projects, it's probably going to be a $30 or $40 million project, for example.
Right.
I don't think it's the county's responsibility to always bond those projects out. I don't think we should have to do that. So that becomes a collaborative effort between CVB, City of Terre Haute, county, any other taxing entity in the community that's willing to help us with that. So as we move forward with a plan, it has been, it's county government. You guys know how it works. What in private life takes 2 or 3 weeks, it takes 2 or 3 months in county government. So as we move forward with some of these things, it's just getting all the stakeholders together, getting a plan in place to present to you guys, which I think we'll probably have the first of next year for the last $10 million. It's difficult, but we're getting there. We're having plenty of meetings. But this is where we're at now with these two requests.
And I don't disagree. It shouldn't just be the county. A lot of times the burden falls upon us, but I think it should be an effort between the city, CVB, and probably some private investment as well. We do have universities here in this community that could benefit from a project such as the athletic facility. A lot would benefit from that, a lot of entities in this community. So I don't disagree there. I'm just concerned if we expend this first $10 million that's less restrictive, and that second $10 million, I think we're not going to have the opportunity, with restrictions that are in place for that second $10 million, to not be able to maybe fund something in a collaborative effort with everybody else.
Yeah,
I don't want to miss that opportunity.
These two specific projects are about 9 months in the making now. They first started off with an interim rule of ARPA, and then we got to the point of we had a final rule, and we knew these projects qualified. So here we are, finally making our first request, and that took that amount of time. So I think as we move forward here and continue to have meetings, we're going to get to a point of having a really good comprehensive list that you guys will be involved in, and we can really do something transformational for the community.
Councilman Thies?
You had just kind of said where we're going at is, and we've mentioned this before, just communication to us is important because, you know, as we sat together with the collaborative meetings that were held and looked through things, we all have ideas. I mean, and I think I'm kind of with President Loudermilk that I said, you know, we've been through a couple really rough years. I want to see something make up for the struggles that all of us have faced during this. You said something about like 10 million is going to be a little bit like with projects like this. You're able to see that a lot easier, faster, like maybe something that's already ready to roll like this.
Yeah.
Even if you were to give us some ideas, I mean, as far as like where that might go, and if that other 10 million is more that collaborative or
Right.
thing, I think that would be helpful because as, and I can't speak for, you know, Councilman Thompson, but for myself and Councilwoman Wilson, as we've gone through budgets, even knowing where, and then as the whole council's gonna vote on it, even knowing where those potential things might go, just as Larry was talking about the impact on Cambridge and things like that, that's really helpful information for us to know as we do the budgets.
Yeah.
And so any kind of information that we can have as we wrap up budgets and get ready to vote on them, you know, in the next month or so, I think will really be very helpful for our process as well, so that we can use the money the best way possible. So even, you know, if it's that first part of it or, you know, however it's divided up, that I think would be extremely helpful.
Yeah,
And
I've tried to include you guys. I think over the past 4 or 5 months, I've been sending you emails and some minutes and stuff like that to try to make sure you're in the know. I think we're going to meet one more time at RJL with Mayor Duke Bennett to make sure there's no duplication of any projects. And then after we have that finalized, I think we'll be more prepared to present kind of a bigger, broader plan of how to use basically the next $16 million.
The faster you can get it to us, the better. I know you guys, I know there's a process, but as soon as, even if it's just a tentative thing, I think that would be very helpful.
I can almost tell you it's probably going to be impossible
I know.
to get you that plan by that time, in a month.
Impossible to do what, I'm sorry?
Just to get a full $20 million plan together by the time you guys wrap up budget
Well, that's
meetings.
why I was saying, even if you could, the
Yeah.
10, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, even like chunks, like that you
Yeah.
can do like that, that would be helpful. And then you can say, and these are potentials for, you know, the rest. But, you know, we know that not everything's set in stone, but just to even have an idea, you know, this is the most I feel like we've learned, you know, since the process, other than the brainstorm sessions and things like that. So for us, this has been very helpful.
Yeah.
And this is the, I guess, the kind of information we want whenever the ideas come out, you know,
Sure.
so that we at least have an idea. And it doesn't have to say that it's set in stone, but I
The
just, you know,
problem
we're
is,
working together.
Marie, as you know, when we say something to the public, it's pretty much set in stone.
Oh.
So I don't want to get ahead of anything.
Right.
And make an announcement publicly and then us not be able to fulfill that promise or that commitment, especially when there's so much collaboration that could take place. So without that, we'll move on to the entrance if you guys are good.
One other
Councilwoman
comment to expound on what Maria's talking about. That $20 million of ARPA money has a tremendous effect on the budget. And I understand that it can be fluid. For example, the last meeting that we went to at RJL, it would have been nice to be supplied with a list of those potential things that we were able to read for just a few minutes. Just a general idea of these are the 15 projects that we're looking at that could be used and the $20 million could be used for, rather than, okay, here's 2 projects that we want to do, here's another project that we want to do. Give us an idea of what you're looking at so that we can at least have some basis to go on. It doesn't have to be set in stone, like she said. It could be fluid. It could say, okay, we can't do that project, here's what we're going to do in its place, something like that. Keeping us in the loop with a full plan is all we're asking, because the piecemealing and this 2 projects here and 3 projects there, it doesn't work for us.
Councilman Thacker?
I'm not opposed. Obviously, I'm not opposed to it, but and when we talk about community, we need to part of the part. Talk about the state county together. There are other things that were we intended.
Right, we did, no, yeah, we went to one.
Or just one commissioner, okay, I'm just asking.
No. So that's just a very broad term that I use there. I mean, when you think, let's go back to the mental health portion there. There are countless players within this community alone who are very invested in the mental health space who would have provide very positive input. We did not have meetings with them on this, but yeah, no, I understand what you mean. And,
Community meeting, and that's what I think community meeting is fine. But, you know, I think that, it's no different than, it's a big household budget. You have a plan, that's what you want. And I think that's what we, I think we talk, bounce around the edge, that, well, we want this, that, no, kind of thing. And if it's a good problem to have, $20 million that we keep spending, that's a good problem. It's a great problem to have. So I don't feel sorry, right? We don't have to think about this part like, and I can spend it.
Councilwoman Wilson?
We just need to work much closer together with a lot more direct communication of what your thought processes are. That we're in the dark, and then these projects are sprung on us, and we're expected to approve them, but we don't understand the full strategic plan. And it really puts us in a bad position, because we don't want to say, okay, we've got this much spending on this much, this much, this much, this much. What's the bottom line? How much have we spent? How much do we still have left? It just, like he said, if you have to have a budget so that we can work effectively, and we're just not there.
Councilwoman Thies?
One last comment. I do believe, though, at the same time as we're talking about the plans and stuff, there are some things, and just, I think the fact that I'm married to a civil engineer and I've been around this stuff my whole life, I know there are some things that are emergency needs compared to some of the other things. And I do think that, you know, when I look at it, you know, I see that. But at the same time, again, I like that these have been ranked. I think that's really good. That, to me, is a plan that eventually in the future, maybe we'll hit, you know, the 6s and so on and keep them rotating. But I think in lieu of some of the other things, I think we just need to have, and again, it doesn't have to be anything set in stone. Maybe it's just us all, you know, talking again like we did at some of those meetings with more communication, but I think it would be helpful.
It is hard as a county commissioner to come up with $20 million worth of plans that you want to include every division of Vigo County in. So when it comes to food and beverage tax, when it comes to ready grants, when it comes to ARPA, all these different entities, it is damn hard to figure out how to spend $20 million and give you guys a confident plan that we can really commit to when things change literally monthly. The funding sources change, the amount of revenue changes. And I think it's a disservice to the taxpayers if we provide a public plan and we don't follow through with it. So,
Not necessarily asking for a public plan. We want a plan for our eyes to see, so that, and we understand, it's not something that we have to have 100% confidence in, and that we're gonna come back and say, hey, you said you were gonna do this. If things change, that's something else that you communicate with us.
okay.
It's not cut in stone, and to put it, I mean, to put plans such as this on in a public forum prior to this meeting goes against what you've said. Not that you did that, it's just I've seen this plan publicly put out there, and it kind of boxes us into a position where, like you just said, once it's out in the public, it's got to be a done deal. Not necessarily a done deal, but it was out there publicly about a week ago.
Yeah, no, and I emailed you guys Friday night and gave you guys some details about it, but I want the public to know that the county commissioners and county council are working together on 16 projects that can have a really big impact on drainage and flooding issues in the county.
Understand, and I agree with that, but we need to have a plan for the whole $20 million first.
Can I answer any other questions before I move on to the building aspect? Okay. So the other aspect of the commissioner's request is detailing with this annex's entryway. As Chris mentioned, it deals with safety features and ADA compliancy. So in conjunction with RQAW, they have established a plan to enhance these features. This proposed project will do the following: establish a clearly defined front entryway, creates a security gate and security station, enhance ADA compliancy. So for example, you can bring a stretcher in here a lot easier and get somebody out if you need them to. A reception desk, enhanced wayfinding measures so the public knows how to get around this building a little bit easier, and then light grading of the front parking lot to improve drainage. With that, I'd invite Jason Soderlund up here to go through some of the renderings.
Hello, thank you for your time. My name is Jason Soderlund. I'm a project architect with RQAW. Clicker. All right. So I just thought I'd walk you through some of the graphics that we've put together to help describe what this project is and the scope of it. It's adding a new entryway to this annex building just on the other side of that wall there. This is a graphic showing a satellite image of the approximate space that this would take up on the site. As we mentioned, this would create an easily identifiable entryway into this building, one that is highly visible by the public. And then Eric touched on some of the other more functional concerns or goals of this project. The security station, so let's see. Red pointer doesn't work too well on the screen. So on the left, you see the main entry vestibule where the public would enter. They would then hang a left and then go through the security gate and security station where there would be a desk with an officer who would have, that would also be the primary security station for observing security camera footage. Beyond the officer station to the right, there's a reception desk for a staff member who could help guide people to the departments that they're trying to find when walking through this building. And then there's an added emergency exit to the far right there. And so this addition is just affixed to the current entry, and then where those double doors are, that's on either side is where the current entrance is located today. These are just some images showing the different elevations of the proposed addition. One of the objectives of this addition was to create a more aesthetically pleasing entry without providing too stark of a contrast to the very stark facade that this building currently has. So this is an exterior rendering of what the proposed design would look like, and then a few interior renderings as well. One from the entry vestibule walking through the security station, and then one from the perspective of standing behind the person at the desk. And then the blue wall is just a small illustration of the potential wayfinding measures that we could implement to, even in the rest of the building, cosmetic changes to help people find their way in this building. And that's all that I have. Eric, good? Next slide. All right.
Thanks. So with that, just to retouch on that, it would improve this annex building safety features, make it more accessible to members of Vigo County. And then depending on proposed bids, the estimated cost is approximately $1.2 million for what Jason just went through. Any questions specifically about the building annex?
So, is there some ways that we could already improve the safety of this building without this addition? Because I know the communication was that we had 6 entryways and that we would reduce this down to 1. We could do that already. Could we lock, don't we have locks? We could already lock 5 doors and make them only employee access, and that would improve the safety of this building greatly. Is that not true?
We could. I just wanted to add one thing. The other thing that this would accomplish was it brings us in compliance with our ADA transition plan that the county currently has. So going forward, any projects we do or any changes we make, we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So we have to make those. So this will update that entryway because right now we have some ADA compliant issues with the entrance. So that is something that we do
Just
have
with
to.
that entrance or with all the?
With all entrances.
With all entrances.
So heights of doors, the handles, the weights of the doors,
Oh,
everything.
because it was built in the 80s.
Right, and it's been retrofitted for ADA standards 15, 20 years ago, but it's not been upgraded to ADA standards today. So anything that we do, we also have to comply with those ADA transition plans that the county has in place. So those things, and the idea was to make a centrally located entryway, and all those other doors would be locked, that when there would be employee entrance.
But they could be locked now.
They could.
And we already have cameras and security viewing right now. And then
At
in
the other
this-
end of the building, yes.
In this budget, and I don't know if you're the right one to answer, but the way I understood is you're gonna have somebody staff there on security. Is that factored into this cost? And a receptionist I didn't see factored into this cost either.
Good evening, again.
Good evening.
The plan is probably to move John Childs from his office all the way in the back there now, his camera system, monitoring system, to the front door. He will greet people as they come in, run them through the x-ray machine, or the metal detector, their baggage through the x-ray machine, and then probably Lisa Foltz, who's up in our office right now, would move over here.
Okay, so not any additional staffing. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's, thanks for
And then
clarifying.
also, this just matches the rest of the buildings that we own. The courthouse has security,
Right.
x-ray, metal detector, juvenile justice system does, and our new jail has metal detector. This is the only building that that has more people in it, besides the courthouse, that doesn't have those security measures in place.
Yeah, and I wondered that myself because, we are badged to where we can come in a door and after 4 it's locked, but, before that it's wide open and.
Yeah, I mean, during COVID, we had the doors locked, so people would come in this one exit.
Mhm.
The issue is, Diana Smith, she gets just a lot of people that come right to her and start asking her for things that she doesn't do in her department. So what we wanted to do is just open both of those doors, this new entryway, have wayfinding on the walls by televisions, Lisa at the front desk to point customers in the right direction to go, and then an easy access. And this also helps with voting and stuff too. People have a way to wait out there instead of lining down the hallways as people are voting inside the annex.
Well, thank you. And I don't know if I need to say it again, is I would probably be in favor of something if it was part of a strategic plan.
I can address that a little bit.
Okay.
This process started with the CARES money, which was a different pool of money. And it started with about $150,000 program to redo the front. Initially, the door situation, which is unacceptable to me in any manner of fashion. You catch your heel on it trying to get in there. You can't get a gurney in and out of those doors. So, as we progressed, again, this was before any of this Recovery Act money, and as we progressed, we thought we had some renderings done, thought we could get it done for about $150,000, and then we got some studies done, found our building was settling on one side, and there was some other problems. So we tried to proceed And my county engineer instructed me that perhaps we needed to get a study, we need to get it engineered, and we need to get a program, and then we need to get it bid. So this changed the scope of it tremendously. Now, again, understand that we had CARES money, and I could be incorrect on my math here, but at the point in time, I think we had about $1.2 million left in that fund. The council saw fit to allocate about half of that for bonuses last year, if you remember correctly, which left probably $600,000 unallocated. That was rolled into county general. Now, I cannot, that may be inaccurate, but I believe that to be pretty close. So, again, the project started out as this, it is this. Our people here at the offices are very interested in this, and we can lock it up and do what you say and make limited access. There's been some things we've had to lock our doors at the commissioner's office. You know, I agree, and you know an interesting thing, Mr. Thacker, that I see going down 4th Street, because I use that trail frequently, is a 6-foot fence with barbed wire on top of it around the laborers' offices down. And I find that really frustrating, because it's a beautiful building, well taken care of there, nice 3 or 4 lots, and they felt the necessity to do that kind of a thing because they have homeless people sleeping on their doorstep in the morning when they come in. They have people coming in and out of those doors for their staff there, and it's just I don't like it. Again, it's a pretty building, and this certainly doesn't add anything to it. So what we're asking is improvement for your county employees and your county government, and this is a way to do it. Again, that's the historical perspective on it, and that's the historical perspective on the money. So, you know, if you can cut this back to $600,000, we had that in CARES money to begin with. Maybe we can do that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I know they've been doing some remodeling in here, and where are we at on the bathrooms? And these 2 bathrooms, they seem like they've stayed.
Have to let you know.
Okay, I just noticed the last 3 weeks to a month, there's not been much progress, and I didn't know if there was something we could do on that.
Have to follow
Right,
up.
thank you.
Yeah.
As far as the retrofitting to ADA compliance, is that just something that can maybe, is it how, do we have a time frame of when that has to be done? Or
2 years ago.
Okay, and so compliance.
What I understood is we're compliant until we do a remodel or do an upgrade, then you have to be to the new regulations. Is that correct, Larry? Yes. Yeah, so we're in compliance, but if we do a remodel, then you have to meet the new standards.
We are in compliance because we have a plan that states
a plan.
to
Okay.
that effect, that
appreciate that.
when we have the money available, I mean, the short of it is, no, we're not in compliance.
Okay,
No,
I didn't
not
realize
very
that.
many
That's-
buildings are.
Right.
But we have a plan that says that when those monies are spent, when those projects happen, that we will come into compliance at that point. So the plan keeps us in compliance, and that's, we just try to stay in the good graces of the feds at that point.
And again, we have another booklet in the commissioner's office about that thick, compiled by DLZ about 2.5 years ago with all the deficiencies of the facility.
So the main issues are security, but then getting a gurney in, he said that multiple times. Is it because of the jog around the, why is it difficult getting a gurney in? And can
They
we
don't
just-
fit.
Why don't we just use the commissioner's entrance? 'Cause
Well, we
it's right there.
can. What if the ambulance shows up out here, which is the main entrance?
That make that the main entrance, and then all the other doors are locked.
Well, Brenda, you can direct them, the emergency response anywhere you want it. I mean, get out here. I mean, when I had somebody coming in here and they were disturbing every office in the annex, I was running up and down the hallways trying to find the individuals responsible for it,
I'm really not.
along
trying
with
to be
Mr.
flippant.
Childs.
I'm not trying to be flippant. I would just like Councilman Thacker mentioned, there's got to be a less expensive way to accomplish the same things, I'm sure. And if there's a study that can be done to find that out, we'd be interested in hearing about that too.
I think we've done this. Again, I told you that my engineer, I tried to get the less expensive. He pulled me back, he reined me in, he said, you can't do this in government, and you can't do it that way. I mean, I'm not imagining this, and he keeps me out of trouble most of the time. You know, he really does.
Most.
That's funny. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your time and your questions. Before I open it up again to questions and discussion amongst you all, I just would like to say one final thing here. And I certainly, you know, having been involved in this process from the initial adoption of the interim rules with ARPA, there is a need for a long-term plan, obviously. And that's been the goal, I think, of everybody involved to date, is to make sure that these dollars are spent very intentionally and in a fashion that's going to provide the best outcome for the county. What was presented here to you today are the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, the things that can show people in this county who know that there's $20 million sitting around that it's going towards projects that, you know, are important, that will improve features of this county and make life a little bit better. And certainly the whole $20 million that's the intention of it, is to make life better here in Vigo County for everyone who lives here. But this is the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, to get the ball rolling on that process. And should you approve this request, there's still $17 million out there that can be put forth to projects that will really create some sort of impact on this community. And these projects will do the exact same, whether it be culverts, drainage to this front entryway here. There's certainly a lot that will be done from these, and it'll get the ball rolling on the rest of the money here for other projects that will be out there and available for the $17 million.
Can we get a copy of this?
Yeah, I'm happy to provide this to
And
you all.
can we also get a copy of the list of the things that we all sat in on the meetings?
Yeah, and to your point from earlier as well, the priorities that we presented here in this presentation came out of those conversations amongst you all. It wasn't just, you know, some certain ideas from anybody in specific. It was, here are some themes that we noticed amongst this mental health. That was a big one. You know, these are all major themes that were relevant in every single conversation that was had up to this point as to what is really going to be a priority for the county moving forward. So happy to provide that, happy to provide the comprehensive list to everyone. Happy to take any questions.
I have just a couple, maybe more for the commissioners. Number one, when did you guys start looking at the entrances, as far as when did that whole project start? I know you said CARES Act and things like that.
Last April. Yeah, it was our second month as county commissioner, so that'd be about February of 21.
21.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I'm eating my dinner.
That's okay. And then the other question that I had was for Larry. Larry, do you guys do bridge studies every year, or how often is that? When was that one done, and how often do you review them?
So by federal guidelines, our bridge studies, our bridge inspections are done every 2 years at a maximum. If there are sufficiency ratings in those bridges that require it, then they're done every year on an annual basis. The culverts are not, they don't fall into that. The federal guidelines don't regulate that. I guess the plan that we've been following right now is every 5 years. I do a culvert study for the most part. There was one done approximately 5 years before this one was done, and those usually don't show
the science that the bridges do, and they're not regulated by the feds. This all still goes into bias. It's a state system that gets reported, so, but like I said, they're funded under the same source, so every 5 years is something that we've put up emphasis on for those.
Okay, and when was this one done?
2020.
2020, okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
They're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Voting to rule the government.
All right, now we're good. Okay. Moving on, additional appropriation 2022-25, ROC 2022-36, council, county general, gasoline, down on page 87.
Council President Loudermilk, would you like me to speak upon this?
Yes, I don't believe there's anybody necessarily here to speak on these, is there?
With the increasing cost of fuel, there are several departments that we're running short on appropriations to make. There's several departments that their appropriation balance was not gonna be, is it going now? It's not gonna be sufficient to make it through the end of the year. I was tasked by the council to send a notice out to every department that has a gasoline line item in their fund or department. And you'll see on page 17, I've provided a list of those departments, and there's notes. There are several that did not respond. Some that responded said they have sufficient, they've either made a transfer, there's sufficient balance. But what the end result was that there's 8 departments that requested the need for additional appropriation for fuel. And while I was gathering that information, I also tried to project maybe what they may need to get through the end of the year based on what they had spent for the first 6 months. And you'll see that in the third column from the right, which is the projected additional appropriation. All of them fell pretty much within those limits. EMA was a little high. Health Department was a little high, but there's a letter of explanation from Joni where they do use a lot of their fuel at the last half of the year instead of during the beginning. So based on the numbers she provided, she came up with a different number of 8,500, which originally it looked like they had a sufficient appropriation. You'll find that there are appropriation ordinances. All of the county general departments are on one ordinance, and then if they are in a different fund, they're on a separate ordinance.
Calissa, where's that chart, that scale that you have on there?
Page 17.
17, thank you.
And Calissa, did they, and because I know when you started this task, prices dropped some, and do you know what number they were using for the average fuel cost, or if they were just taking, we've spent X and we think we need Y?
There are some that actually used, I think, but a fuel cost, I think the sheriff's department might have.
Okay.
But most of them use, this is kind of what we spent in the first
Oh,
half, or
okay.
there was 2 heavy months of, because fuel didn't go up really until like March, So I think it was they used numbers that were from maybe April to June to help calculate that. So, and you'll note, there should be an email from each one of the individuals, an email or a letter that, provides an explanation of what they're doing, or policies they're implementing to help with fuel efficiency. And that's after page 17. So those are included in your packet.
While we sort through this information, does anyone like to, there's no one here to ask questions of, I guess, but to make comments?
One thing I'd like to add real quick, the sheriff asked for a range, 75 to 85,000. It was advertised at 85, so that you could make your determination on where you wanted it to be.
So are all these requests presumed to get into through the end of the year?
Yes.
And what comes of any excess that's not used?
Well, if there's any excess that's not used, it can be transferred without council approval into another 2 series. Or if they have an expenditure that was made in 2022 but not paid for in 2022, they can encumber it into their 2023 budget.
So we may be better served not to do the full 6 months with us not knowing what to anticipate moving forward with gas prices.
Maybe on, but some of the small ones where they're saying think they need 2,000, when you
But
look
maybe
at.
some of the larger ones that are.
Yeah, you might wanna look at the larger ones, but the smaller ones, I don't think it's gonna make that much difference. I mean, and they're pretty much, and even through my calculations where, they were pretty much within the range. And Larry's getting ready to talk, but I estimated his at approximately 124,000, and he requested 100,000. So.
Correct.
Thank you.
So, sorry, President, Member of the Council, Larry Robbins, again, County Engineer. So when I, in discussions with Calissa, I tried to be as conservative as I could. I've done some things to save fuel much as we can. I mean, we just don't waste fuel all the time, but we've cut down on idle time. We've cut down on stockpiling operations that we usually do in the summertime. We've cut back on mowing a little bit. We had a dry spell through there, which actually helped out with that. I had 4 advertised positions for mowers, to where I had everybody out there. I only hired 2, and I kept it at 2. They seem to keep up. So I'm trying to, my request was kind of bare minimum. So, I mean, there may be a chance, we get a snowstorm in, late November. That's really what drives my fuel costs through the roof. So luckily, the fuel prices weren't high, this early this year when we had, several of the snowstorms, or we had them out there, because my fuel costs were in the 25,000 range. They usually ran around the 16,000 range on average. Come, May and June, they were 34 and 35,000, and I wasn't plowing snow. So those things are just, it's just the cycle of we go through construction time when we're stockpiling, we're plowing snow, those different operations, and diesel fuel is that driver of that. So I try to be as conservative as I could. So, I can't speak for the other departments, but my department as a whole, if there is something that's left over, I probably would ask to encumber it, just because we could be seeing these fuel things. I've adjusted my budget for next year, but it's still gonna be one of those things that we may battle. Here in the last few years, we haven't, fuel prices have been relatively low. We haven't had to really do that, but that's something that I did in my department. So
I appreciate that, Larry. And I know you're very thorough and diligent in everything you do, so I do appreciate that.
No, you're good.
No, go ahead, no.
It's not specifically to Larry. I was just wondering if we have a breakdown of how many vehicles are diesel versus regular fuel, because
I would say the majority of them are probably in Larry's department. You may have.
I would say Parks Department would have a few diesel.
They would, and EMA has
EMA,
one.
yeah.
So I think they have a diesel truck.
Diesel would predominantly be, I mean, the lion's share, that would be highway.
and
That's tandems, graders, equipment. I mean, we're out grading gravel roads. I mean, we've cycled back on a few of that. You know, we may have had some rough gravel roads here this summer, but, you know, we're trying to do our part to make sure we can, you know, do what we can and conserve it, so.
As a farmer, I hear that, but it's like, I really feel like, the way that gas prices, they're starting to come down a little bit, but for regular fuel more so, diesel's not really coming down.
Right.
So I think that needs to be factored into what we're analyzing here, that the departments that require diesel, we ought to be a little bit more conscious of.
Well, out of the ones that are listed, you would have highway, and I believe EMA, and I don't even know if they drive that diesel truck all the time. I think it's one that they kind of leave, like if they need to pull a trailer or something like that, they use it for that, but not for their everyday driver.
And parks.
Parks probably equipment. It's probably just equipment. It's probably off-road diesel, yes. So we use off-road diesel in all of our equipment, you know, for the most part, and then, you know, on-road diesel for any of the trucks. I'd have to look, I can't remember now. It's been too long since I looked at that budget, but
The difference between regular and diesel? Oh.
off-road versus
Sorry.
dyed.
Sorry. I was just kind of bouncing off what you were talking about with, not calculating the whole 6 months because we don't know what's gonna happen with, but I feel strongly that diesel's not gonna bounce down as readily as regular.
I guess, Cliff, I do have a question about one, and it's only, I say it's only $3,000, but it is $3,000, and it's the last one, the Juvenile Center. The original appropriation was $1,000 for the year.
Yeah.
The balance on July 1st was $325, so there's 32% left, but the request is 3 times as much at $3,000 of what the,
If you go up about, it's a little more than halfway down, it's in the county general section, .0384 Juvenile Center.
right?
So they used, a lot of their appropriation in the general fund in January through April, and then they started shifting to the non-reverting fund. And he, was specific in his email that instead of funding any of it out of the general fund, he would suggest funding it through the non-reverting. So you kind of have
That's
to
why he
combine
hasn't-
those two together.
That's why he hasn't requested anything out of the general fund.
Correct. So that's, you'd have to take into consideration both budgets, but only funding it, the shortfall in one.
Which we have to look with balance.
Okay. So, we've kind of discussed this as a whole. That was, that was additional appropriation 2022-25, ROC 2022-36, council, county general. You have those departments listed there on page 87. Let's make sure you have it all clear. Record, you have sheriff, 85,000, surveyor, 2,000, EMA, 2,400, building inspection, 800. Then next, we have additional appropriation 2022-26, ROC 2022-36, council health. Again, that is gasoline, and request is $8,500. Next, we have additional appropriation 2022-27, ROC 2022-36, Council Highway. Request is $100,000. Next, we have additional appropriation 2022-28, ROC 2022-36, Council Parks and Recreation, again gasoline. Request is $24,000. And lastly, we have additional appropriation 2022-29, ROC 2022-36, Council Juvenile Justice Non-Reverting for gasoline. Request is $3,000. Is there any additional discussion about any of those?
I
Councilwoman
just
Wilson?
wanted to, on the Parks Department, it's the same situation. that Adam came up with this, at the budget meeting, was talking the same as Larry Robbins. He's not asking for as much as we projected that he might need. And he was the first one, I think, that we heard that had already had a plan in place for how he was going to reduce his fuel usage, which was phenomenal, like you're doing. That's the same thing that you did. So, I mean, I'm going to commend you both there.
Any other questions, comments? With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh,
Just to keep in mind with the juvenile center's budget, gas budget, he's going to be driving an additional 3 miles 3 times a day coming up as inmates transition to the new jail and their meals are made down there. So he will be doing a little bit more driving.
okay. All right, thank you. Now, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Councilwoman Wager, second by Councilman Thacker. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. No one opposes.